Herman Cain is coming off a win in the Florida straw vote, and he's surging in that new Fox poll. But he's getting blasted for one of his latest remarks. Yesterday on CNN, Cain upset some African Americans while talking about his bid to win the Republican nomination. Let's listen to Mr. Cain.
Many African Americans have been brainwashed into not being open-minded, not even considering a conservative point of view. For 2/3 of them, Wolf, that is the case. Now, the good news is I happen to believe that 1/3 to 50% of the black Americans in this country, they are open-minded. I meet them every day. They stop me in the airport. And so this whole notion that all black Americans are necessarily going to stay and vote Democrat and vote for Obama, that's simply not true. More and more black Americans are thinking for themselves.
Well, did he go too far with that comment? Cynthia Tucker's a Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist, and Michael Steele's the former chair of the Republican National Committee, and, of course, an MSNBC political analyst. Let me ask you first. Well, I'll start with you. I don't know how to register these things. Everybody sensed that maybe they should be, maybe they shouldn't. Brainwashed. Black voters are brainwashed into voting Democrat. Does that say something about the voter or about Cain or what?
Well, Cain was certainly condescending when he suggested that black voters only vote for Democrats because they have been brainwashed. How condescending is that? As if black voters don't have the good sense to look at a party's platforms and proposals and decide who they want to support. But let's face it, Herman Cain, even if he were somehow to become the Republican nominee, wasn't going to get a lot of black votes anyway, because of his policies. Yeah. So it hardly matters that he offended some black voters.
Well, there's so many levels to go at this. I don't know whether they go at it at the level of political correct, wrong speech, or, well, you start. We'll see where we go.
I'll take it from that point first, because I think in the context of running for president of the United States, there's a way to express a particular opinion with respect to how people vote without getting everyone riled up. And I think what happens here, the point, which I think is a valid one, is lost in what people hear him say right out of the box. Everything after brainwashed, if that was all he said, would be a part of a conversation I think would be important. But when you start the conversation by saying, well, the audience that I'm going after is brainwashed, guess what? That audience, you're not going after
anymore. Okay, let's start after that word brainwashed to the question of voting patterns. Let's take a look at the latest voting pattern. Now, this is pretty pronounced here. 1988, the Democrats let's look at this. A majority of African Americans have historically supported Democratic candidates for president. Since the 1970s, Democratic candidates have received over 80% of the African American vote. And look at these numbers recently. Of course, look at that. Barack Obama came close to winning nearly all the black vote in 2008. I think he lost 4%. He was 95-4. So let me get to a couple levels, because this is a fascinating question. Brainwashed into voting D, well, that would be stupid. People aren't taught to vote mechanically the Democratic line. So it's to vote for Democratic candidates because you historically believe they're on your side. Now, what does that mean, Cynthia, to you? Why is it 90-some% almost voting Democrat?
Well, I think it is clear that black Americans believe that Democrats have the policies that help them. It's also clear that Republicans have run on policies that are openly antagonistic to black voters. And it's not just policies. It's the so-called dog whistle in politics. It's the Southern strategy. It is the Republican Party's going out of its way
starting in 64.
To send signals to conservative whites that say, I understand why you're upset about the civil rights movement. I understand why you are unhappy about those uppity black folk. Those are the things that have black voters running into the arms of the Democratic Party.
There's so much wrong with what Cynthia just said. First off, that belies the facts at this point in time. Number one, the Southern strategy died in 1992 when Bubba went back to the Democratic Party in the election of Bill Clinton. Pure and simple. It has been a national nightmare for Republicans to cobble together the votes they need. Having win national elections, yeah, that's great. But look at the percentage of the white vote that they're getting in each of successive elections is getting smaller and smaller. As more and more minorities become politically engaged, particularly in Hispanics, the Republican Party is going to have a real problem. Number two, we elected 2 African Americans to the United States Congress in 2010. We elected African Americans to the legislatures around the country, including Texas. So this idea that the Republican Party can't speak to the African American community is not necessarily valid, but to this point it is. That the party has a real problem making sure that folks understand that with respect to those policies, economic empowerment, educational empowerment, general empowerment. Okay,
let's listen to one of those fellows you mentioned.
It's a powerful message.
Here's one of the African Americans elected to Congress. Here's Alan West from Florida. Let's listen to him.
You have this 21st century plantation that has been out there where the Democrat Party has forever taken the black vote for granted. And you have established certain black leaders who are nothing more than the overseers of that plantation. So I'm here as the modern day Harriet Tubman to kind of lead people on the Underground Railroad away from that plantation.
Is this the only way you get quoted on television? Using language that drives somebody crazy? Overseers?
I have
Simon Legree.
I have no idea why Alan West, who has made a name for himself, not playing the so-called race card, would decide to hold himself up as a Harriet Tubman, who's going to lead black people away from the plantation. That strikes your average.
Who is Harriet Tubman? Tell me.
She was a very historic figure during the time of slavery who helped black enslaved folks escape through the Underground Railroad.
And a Republican, but that's another story.
Back in the days of Lincoln.
But wait a minute.
And black folks voted for the Republican Party way back when.
It's not way back. The black vote has been solidly Republican up until the 1950s. In fact, the last Republican president to get a majority of the black vote was Eisenhower in '56. He got close to 60% of the black vote. But that's the point. The civil rights era
let's not trash the Republican Party historically, because in the 1960s, when they actually voted for civil rights, the Republican Party was overwhelmingly for the Civil Rights Bill 64. The key piece of legislation, Dirksen led that fight, and it was the Southern Democrats that held out against it.
But that was a different Republican Party. And then in 1964, Barry Goldwater got the Republican nomination and ran on a platform of
against the Civil Rights Bill,
which was opposed to the Civil Rights Movement, and that drove black people to the Democratic Party.
And you're absolutely right. Dr. King went to the pulpit of his church and made it very clear where he was standing because of the Democratic president's support.
Let me give you a shot here.
For King.
30 seconds.
Yeah.
You can make your case. Why are most African Americans wrong to vote 90% Democrat?
Well, because you're not leveraging the one asset that matters most to the political class, and that is your vote. If I give all my votes to one individual, at some point she will stop listening to me. If you pay no attention to my vote, and I have no incentive to pay attention to you, guess what? I'm sitting out here
voting strategically. Even though you don't agree with the Republicans, give them a little once in a while so they can play ball with you. But make them come to the issues as you see them so that they can, because that's ultimately what elections are about. You're going to go. Okay, who should go first? Should the Republicans go to your community first, or should your community go to them?
Absolutely. Look, my first day on the job as chairman, I went to Harlem, and people asked me, "Why are you going to Harlem?" Because that's where the votes are.
That's why you succeeded as chairman of the Republican Party.
I did.
But they didn't like you for doing that.
Seats in the House.
Did they like you doing that?
Some liked it, some didn't. I mean, that's the reality of
politics. When
politics.
Jack Kemp comes back, let me know, will you? I'm waiting for. Is he here? Good in spirit. Thank you. I mean, a Republican who really wants a big.
Not only has he passed on, so has that Republican Party passed on.
Here.
Thank you. I accept that, and I'm glad you're here. Thank you, Michael Steele, my friend, and thank you, Cynthia Tucker. I love to see you argue.